But with each new conservative speaker came a whole slew of different challenges from the unhinged left. From heckling mobs to renegade senators, we overcame opposition, and now we stand at the pinnacle of victory. And I would like to thank, first and foremost, all of our supporters, and specifically the donors who personally helped to ensure that Ben Shapiro could come and speak to you all tonight. I'd like to thank...
Ben Shapiro might be smart. He might actually be extremely intelligent. He might be so well informed, so quick on his feet, and so eloquent that he can eviscerate or decimate or destroy any argument brought against him. Unfortunately, we have no way of knowing. Most of the time Shapiro is speaking, it's either a speech to an audience of sycophants or answers to softball questions from a news anchor. The rare moments when Shapiro is actually facing someone who pushes back on his ideas is to either a 20-year-old college leftist or some other repulsive lunatic like a tranny, sometimes both. The only exception that comes to mind is Shapiro's interview with Andrew Neil at the BBC. When challenged, Shapiro became quite animated and flustered. This is a side of him that he and his sponsors never want to be seen, so he spends his time facing the others I mentioned. We all know 20-year-olds, and most of us have been one. Apart from a few rare instances, 20-year-olds are stupid. Okay, perhaps they're not necessarily stupid, but almost no 20-year-old student is going to be able to stand in front of a hostile audience and have a salient back and forth with a man over twice that student's age. A man who has been speaking publicly for all of that student's lifetime, and who is rich, internationally recognized, and stands at the bully pulpit. And the other leftists, not from a college campus, who come against Shapiro, are typically so gross in appearance, language, or ideas that Shapiro wins any debate by default, simply by the audience's visceral reaction to the person challenging him. However, it ultimately does not matter how skilled the leftists who debate Shapiro are. His audience is primarily conservative, white, male, and Christian. These are people who quite naturally hate the left and everything it stands for. Ben Shapiro is the spearhead of the establishment right. I'll say that again for emphasis. Ben Shapiro was the spearhead of the establishment right. Communist, intersectional feminists, genderqueers, these mean nothing to Shapiro because he's not trying to keep people from going to the left. He's trying to keep his audience from going further right. Thus, the only meaningful challenge to Ben Shapiro can come from the right. His place as a major figure in the establishment is secure so long as he can keep fulfilling the role of marginalizing nationalist ideas. He was the loudest of the never-Trumpers, hating Trump because during Trump's campaign, the Donald championed the same ideas that are being brought before the establishment right, i.e. Conservative Inc., now, regarding illegal immigration, H-1B workers, foreign aid, and American identity and its European roots. The left called Donald Trump a Nazi to try and shut him up. Shapiro just spent an entire speech at Stanford applying the same tactic to those further right than him. It's ironic that in his speech he specifically mentions the left doing this, and then does it himself. As I listened to Shapiro's speech at Stanford, simple and short rejoinders came to mind. I thought the best way to relay these would be to replay his speech and simply add subtitles. I'm trying to avoid a long rambling response for each point or being accused of taking his words out of context. Instead, I'll give a simple reply that is hopefully a decent counterpoint on its own, or at least the starting point to a line of argument that I think is fairly obvious. The hardest part in doing this is that Shapiro uses shotgun tactics in which he talks so fast and uses so many facts that it's almost impossible to keep up with in real time. It's like watching him as having your video player set on 1.5x, except it's normal time. He does this to make his opponents feel overwhelmed, and so he can slip in so many half-truths or outright lies, the other party can't respond to everything. It's a slimy tactic, frankly, and it's all too common in American debate today. Before proceeding, let's remember that Ben Shapiro was given a large platform, lots of airtime, and lots of money to perform his function in Conservative Inc. He would have you believe, as he mentions in his speech, that his prominence is due to winning in the marketplace of ideas, that those further to the right of him have ideas so illogical, repugnant, and therefore unpopular that they cannot survive. This is not true. Ben Shapiro is propped up by the very institutions and corporations that have purged his challengers. Channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers have been demonetized and removed from YouTube. Companies like Alphabet, Twitter, Facebook, Cloudflare, GoDaddy, Vimeo, Chase Bank, Bank of America, PayPal, Patreon, and Stripe have denied services to people with thousands of subscribers, but who have views further right than Shapiro, the only place from which a meaningful challenge will come. Universities still host Shapiro's speeches. Which of these services, essential for any independent commentator to build a following, have blacklisted Shapiro? Apparently, if I can't build my own bank, credit card processor, web hosting service, electronic security protection, social media platform, and have enough servers to hold my content, then I didn't win in the marketplace of ideas. Nationalist views are popular. That's what fueled Donald Trump to victory in 2016. That was the energy behind his movement. And that is exactly the problem for Ben Shapiro and Conservative Inc. Only now, the advantage that they have is that it's a lot easier to overcome a group of college-age right-wingers online than it is to overcome a loudmouth orange billionaire who knows how to play to the crowd.
Hi, how are you? Oh, thanks. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. Well, thanks first of all to the SCRs who actually have to deal with the fallout of this speech. And Young America's Foundation, thanks to Fred R. Allen always for sponsoring these lectures. Today's speech was supposed to be titled, "No Leftist Idiots Don't Get to Raise My Kids." And judging by the behavior of the leftists outside and the run-up to this particular event, I think it's pretty obvious why. Their own parents did a terrible job of raising them. My favorite is that apparently there's some dolt out there walking around in a white sheet, to which I say, shout out to Governor Ralph Northam. I really appreciate the level of generosity and open-spiritedness of the dorm community here at Stanford. Apparently, the folks at the SCRs put up some posters for this lecture. They were quickly removed, which is a real free speech problem if the administration does not do anything about it. And they're replaced by a letter from the Nordelpha staff. This is one of your dorms. Yeah, shout out to you guys too. It says, "Dear Nordelpha community, we, the Nordelpha staff, care about you, your feelings, your physical and emotional health. You matter and are welcome here in this space. We welcome and center the voices that some may wish to specifically marginalize and target. In that way, we support black people, people of color, non-binary folks, LGBTQIA folks, Muslims, and Jews. People from diverse backgrounds learning and flourishing together is what makes Stanford and Nordelpha special, particularly if they never have to hear anything they don't want to hear." That last part didn't write. "Thank you for being you. You are a star. And don't let anyone tell you you're not. Why, thank you too, Barney the dinosaur. Please reach out to any of us if you need to talk or need us to support you in any way. Honestly, if seeing a flyer requires psychological support, you needed psychological support before you saw the flyer. Now, as I say, this lecture was going to be about the left's attempts to rewrite American history, gender politics, basic morality, their ongoing attempts to seize the cultural and governmental heights of power in order to control how Americans raise their kids. And we'll hit some of those themes tonight. I'm sure that it'll come up during the Q&A. And just a quick preview, the left does, in fact, attempt to twist American history, turn it into an unalloyed story of American evil, try to divide us from each other by claiming that we are not part of the same American family, try to suggest that American history is not about the constant attempt to perfect the fulfillment of eternal American principles that are embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, but is instead a power hierarchy of dominance and cruelty. The left does indeed attempt to do that. The left does indeed attempt to shove its perverse view of gender politics down the throat of parents all over the country, and that will continue and get worse. They continue to maintain idiotically that men can be women and women can be men, which is obviously untrue. They even maintain that small children should be able to decide whether, in fact, they are members of the opposite gender. I have a 3-year-old son. Okay, that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. My 3-year-old son is not capable of deciding what he eats in the morning. He is not capable of deciding what he wears. But 4 days ago, he was very angry, and so he decided to lie face down in a parking lot. If I had let him do that, identify as a human pancake, he would be dead right now. It is my job as a parent to ensure that I teach my children about the realities of life, the realities of biology, that I set standards for my kids, because that's what being an adult is about. Okay. The left is also attempting to rewrite basic morality and basic law by suggesting that speech is violence and violent speech, and they are cramming that down on kids, which is why you have people protesting and suggesting that the very fact that I speak and say things that they don't like is some form of incitement or some form of violence. So we'll talk about some of that tonight, but late-breaking events have made it so that I have switched the topic of this speech. I've decided to talk about something else, and you're all just going to have to deal with it because I have the microphone. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the dangerous game that's being played by two particular nasty groups who feed off one another. I'm speaking about the radical left and the alt-right. Now, I discuss the radical left on campus all the time. That's because campuses are dominated by the censorious and nasty radical left. On the other hand, I actually did question whether I wanted to talk about the alt-right tonight. One reason is because what the alt-right wants more than anything else in the world is attention. They rant, or they cry, or they even sing their white supremacist anti-Semitic moon landing conspiracism into their webcams for hours at a time while insisting they don't care about attention. But of course, that's exactly what they care about the very, very most, which is why they've been distributing calendars of conservative events and encouraging trolls to show up to ask pre-written questions designed to elicit lols from like-minded idiots who populate 8chan and Gab. The other reason is because there is a great deal of factionalism on the alt-right, so the very term alt-right is controversial among some of its adherents. Some of them call themselves the new right and swear they despise the founders of the alt-right. Some call themselves America First, trying to hijack President Trump's slogan to give themselves the patina of credibility. More on that in a second. Some name their movements after mammals, some after amphibians. It gets confusing. It's meant to be. You see, keeping people confused is actually one of their chief tactics because it gives them room to ridicule anybody who doesn't understand all of their esoteric labels and jokes and beliefs. So why talk about the alt-right at all? The answer is simple. The radical left and the alt-right desperately need each other. Need each other. They're playing a game in which the radical left seeks to delegitimize anybody who isn't on the radical left by lumping them in with the despicable alt-right, and in which the alt-right seeks to make common cause with anybody canceled by the radical left, specifically with supporters of President Trump who've been maligned falsely as evil by the radical left in order to artificially boost their alt-right numbers. These two goals are mutually reinforcing. Now, first, I want to just say, straight for the record, okay, the alt-right does not mean anybody who's an immigration restrictionist, or people who are pro-tariff, or people who are more isolationist on foreign policy. It's a very specific set of beliefs, and what you'll see the alt-right do is adopt the beliefs of some of these other movements in order to find cover for their actual belief system, which really is quite vile. So here is how this game works. Let's say that you're on the alt-right, whatever your preferred label. Okay, I'll just call you the alt-right for purposes of this conversation because that's what you are. Let's say, for example, that you're constantly talking about white civilization, a nonsensical term because civilization is not defined by color, but by history and culture and philosophy. But let's say that you say white civilization is under attack by multiracial hordes. Ooh. Let's say that you're antipathetic toward Jews, you're enraged by the liberties guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. Let's say you spend your days ranting about how conservatives and traditional classical liberals, you know, the sole protective force in America against the radical left, haven't conserved anything. You say that America is not a propositional or a creedal nation, even though the nation's founding literally begins with the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." Let's say that you cite Christianity as the basis of your values, but you're more likely to quote Nietzsche than Christ. Let's say that you constantly lament the decline of our fundamental institutions, but you don't belong to a church, you don't belong to a bowling league, you don't belong to the Lions Club, you don't belong to the Rotary Club, you don't own a home, you don't have a grown-up job, you probably aren't married, you probably aren't a parent. Let's say that your greatest achievement in life isn't family, kids, church, community, but that you once made a semi-ironic meme that 7 other people like you upvoted on Telegram. Turns out not all that many Americans agree with you. After all, your agenda is pretty disgusting. You also happen to have the unfortunate habit of saying really disgusting things when you think other people aren't listening. For example, your thought leaders, your self-proclaimed lead influencers, will say they're not on the same page as white supremacist Richard Spencer, but then they'll go on Facebook and post about the Charlottesville white supremacist rally, quote, "The rootless transnational elite know that a tidal wave of white identity is coming, and they know that once the word gets out, they will not be able to stop us. The fire rises." Really hiding the ball there, are you? Let's say that your self-proclaimed lead influencer has compared Alex Jones's ban from social media, a ban, by the way, which I opposed publicly, to a modern Kristallnacht and the beginning of a white Holocaust. But when it comes to the Holocaust itself, you have some questions. You do. Right? Those questions are questions like this. This is a direct quote from a lead influencer in the alt-right. Matt says, If I take 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies and Cookie Monster has 15 ovens working 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years, how long does it take Cookie Monster to make 6 million batches of cookies? I don't know, that's a good question. No, that doesn't sound really correct to me. Wait a second, it takes 1 hour to build a batch of cookies and you have 15 ovens, probably in 4 different kitchens, right, doing 24 hours a day for 5 years? How long would it take to get to 6 million? I don't know, it certainly wouldn't be 5 years, right? The math doesn't seem to add up there. None of it really adds up, none of it really makes sense. This crazy cookie analogy, 6 million cookies? Nah, I don't buy it. That's all irony. I'm an irony bro. That's all irony. And this is the kind of stuff some of these folks are saying. For the record, by the way, just so the facts are on the record, according to Henrik Tauber, a member of the Sonder Commando who worked in several of Birkenau's gas chambers, quote, we worked in 2 shifts, a day shift and a night shift. On average, we incinerated 2,500 bodies a day. The procedure was to put the first body with the feet toward the muffle, back down and face up. Then a second body was placed on top, again face up, but head toward the muffle. We had to work fast. The bodies put in first soon started to burn. Their arms and legs rose up. Women's bodies burned much better and more quickly than those of men. For this reason, when a charge was burning badly, we would introduce a woman's body to accelerate the combustion, unquote. But maybe he was just being ironic, bro. In fact, it seems like some members of the alt-right, they have a pretty large problem with Jews generally. They'll tweet things like, quote, so-called Jewish values tend to favor liberal and internationalist positions like abortion, foreign intervention, multiculturalism, homosexuality, and mass immigration. Some of you will say that you're hurt in your daily existence by Jews. You've suggested that a religious Catholic who writes for my website, a guy named Matt Walsh, is a, quote, Shabbos Goy race traitor who's throwing his own people under the bus and hates white people. In fact, Walsh is, according to you, an F word, that would be for gay people, P word, as in female genitalia, race traitor who works for the Jews. What prompted that outburst, by the way, on the part of this alt-right lead influencer? The fact that my friend, Matt Walsh, said that the El Paso racist shooter should be publicly executed in brutal fashion. Also, it turns out, lead influencers in the alt-right not so fond of black people either. One particular lead influencer, when asked if having sex with a dog is the same thing as having sex with a black man, said, quote, they would both be degenerate. Really, really classy people. So, when you believe all these garbage things, and you've said all these garbage things, and you are in fact a garbage human being, when your views are obviously white supremacist garbage, what do? You take 4 steps in order to legitimize yourself. Step number 1, the Trump gambit. First, you declare your allegiance to President Trump, and declare that you're not really alt-right, even though you obviously are. You show up to lectures wearing a MAGA hat in order to get the media to cover it, and in order to demonstrate that you are truly a representative of the 63 million Trump voters. You call yourself America First, hijacking Trump's slogan, but what you actually mean is white Americans first. The media eat it up because the media love nothing better than, of course, lumping Trump in with particularly this group. You don't have to take my word for it. You can just ask Andrew Anglin, the neo-Nazi who runs the Daily Stormer. He posted a calendar of events for alt-righters to attend and attack, including this particular event. And he wrote last week, quote, I think basically we've got a model going forward that is going to work. If we get questions, we'll take questions, but simply being there and heckling in the audience relentlessly is extremely effective. And you can meet other like-minded people there this way as well. Remember, we're all good optics, American nationalists now. Longtime readers will remember this is something I pushed very hard while others were dressing up in neo-Nazi costumes. And by talking about these issues instead of saying, gas the kikes or whatever, we are more or less immune to being fired or kicked out of school if doxxed. You just, if somebody calls you alt-right, you say, no, of course I'm not an alt-right, neo-Nazi, racist, white supremacist. I'm just an America First nationalist and a MAGA supporter. Now, this is a clever tactic. It is. Donald Trump is many things. He is not a white supremacist, and he is not an anti-Semite. His daughter is an Orthodox Jew, so is his son-in-law, so are all of his policy advisors, or at least many of his policy advisors with regard to the Middle East. Donald Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem in a bold move of solidarity with the people of Israel. He has a roundabout named for him in Jerusalem. Trump Heights, Ramat Trump, is named for him in the Golan Heights. Donald Trump has nothing to do with these so-called self-proclaimed America First asshats. In fact, he's very close to one of the people they attack the most, Charlie Kirk. Right? Donald Trump regularly invites Charlie to official meetings in the Oval Office. But, these people bought some MAGA hats, so the left will spread their lie, and they know it, which is why, again, they're encouraging people to wear MAGA hats to events. So be on the lookout. That doesn't mean everyone with a MAGA hat is an alt-righter, obviously. What I'm saying is that the vast majority of people who wear MAGA hats are not alt-righters. I'm saying the alt-right is looking to disguise themselves specifically for purposes of publicity. Okay, step 2, then you declare yourself the true conservatives, the true heirs to conservatism. Right? Not a bunch of masturbating losers who live in your mother's basement. No, you're the true heirs of conservatism. The way you do this is that you simply lie about mainstream conservatives. You suggest that mainstream conservatives are insufficiently committed to social conservatism. So, one of the things that all these people have been planning to do the last several weeks is they show up in the Q&A lines, then they ask the same 9 questions. So I'm just going to knock down these questions right now, and then we can actually have a real Q&A with real questions. Saves us time on the other end. So they've been showing up to events and asking people like my friend Dan Crenshaw, Republican of Texas and former Navy SEAL. A question, guys, it's okay. I have one question. Are you protesting the part where I'm condemning the Nazis? Like, you hear what I'm doing right now. Do you have ears? I'm literally condemning Nazis, and you're telling me to leave. Do you hear yourselves? Nah. Adding to the public discourse. Switch it up. We heard this one. Keep going. Different one. Come on. Anytime. Switch it up. All right. Okay. You know what? Okay, good news. I have a microphone and speakers. And, you know, it turns out that in my daily life, I deal with 2 screaming children under the age of 6 every single day. So, dealing with 7 screaming protesters who are significantly less smart than my 5-year-old and my 3-year-old is really not that much of a challenge. Alrighty, so. Goodbye. In the words of President Trump, bye-bye. I gotta be honest with you, I'm extraordinarily puzzled. I'm standing up here bashing the living shit out of Nazis, and they're telling me I have to leave over it. What's a guy gotta do? Yeah, I noticed. Okay, so back to, we're gonna get rid of all these questions so we don't have to deal with them in the Q&A. So a lot of these alt-writers have been showing up at various events, and they've been asking questions like, how does anal sex help us win the culture war? Really, this is the thing they've been asking. I mean, I'm not sure how them masturbating to pictures of frogs helps win the culture war either, but the purpose is to simultaneously pose as edgy and also to preserve your ability to say that you were joking, but the goal is really to suggest that if you oppose the alt-right, you're in favor of destroying the traditional family, which is ridiculous. Now, the actual answer, the non-snarky answer to this ridiculous question, is that criminalizing consensual activity without externalities is by definition losing the culture war. Okay, what helps America win the culture war is freedom and liberty and the government not being involved in your life. And if you, like me, believe that certain personal activity is a sin, you know how you win that culture war? By having people join your church, by engaging with your community, by teaching your children your values. That's the way you win a culture war. In fact, I'm bewildered by it. There's great irony in watching alt-writers claim they should use the commanding heights of government to cram down their viewpoints on others, while complaining that the left uses the commanding heights of government to cram down their viewpoints on others. You can't really whine about using the government to shut down your viewpoint when you plan on using the government to shut down everybody else's viewpoint. But many folks on the alt-right are busy playing true believers by suggesting that social conservatives like me, people who wrote entire books on the evils of pornography in American society, or people like David French, who spend their days fighting for religious freedom in court, are standing ardently in favor of drag queen story hour at the local library. Okay, newsflash. I think drag queen story hours border on child abuse. I think parents who expose young children to sexualized cross-dressing adults are doing something wrong and bad. I also think that in governmental terms, if you allow the library to decide which speech to ban, it's much more likely to ban the Bible than drag queen story hour. I'm for limited government because I do not trust the government to decide what kind of speech it wants to ban. Okay, so now I'm going to knock down a few of their Q&A questions about me personally. We can go through these real quick because I don't really care about them. First, they claim that I hate Jesus. Okay, I'm a Jew. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't mean to be facetious about this, but like this is obvious that I don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. You see, like I have a hat. It says the whole thing, like truly. With that said, I'm really, really glad that Christians do. Like really glad that Christians do. I mean actual Christians, not the fake Christians who quote Nietzsche but don't know anything about the Gospel of John. I mean the kind who go to church and seek God's grace and love their neighbors. I'm very, very happy that America is largely a Christian nation. I wish it were more so. I think American-style Christianity is one of the best things to ever happen to civilization, ever. My best friend and business partner is a lay minister. I employ tons of Christians. I've given them the freedom and the platform to share their faith. I've written one of the best-selling conservative books of all time that basically calls for more conservatives to go back to church and argues for the value of biblical religion. Okay, a couple more of these. They say that I want America to fight wars for Israel. Nope, nope. First of all, Israel can take care of herself. They say that I'm a chicken hawk. I want to send our boys to die, but I won't fight myself. Okay, reality. People who join the military are braver than I. They've sacrificed more than I. That is a fact. Also a fact. No one in America sends people to die. People volunteer for our military. The draft has not been in effect for several decades. The people who join our military, they're not victims, and nothing annoys them more than being treated as victims by people who use them as political pawns. They don't need protection from me. I, like every other American, I have opinions on how to use the American military because we have civilian control of the military here in the United States, which is a very, very good thing. But suggesting that anybody who doesn't serve in the military can't have an opinion about the use of the military is like suggesting that anybody who is not a police officer can't have opinions about how the police ought to be used. By the way, our soldiers don't need the victimology, the sort of patting on the back of a bunch of weak, effeminate losers who live in mom's basement. They are protecting you. They are stronger than you. Okay, other ones. I attacked the Covington kids. I mean, this one is so absurd. I literally was on the phone with the Covington. I know them personally. I was on the phone with them nearly every night, guiding them in the media and through legal strategy. Okay, I haven't revealed that publicly until now, but now that this accusation is out there, I may as well say it. You can call them, you can ask them. Okay, they also suggest, these folks, that I didn't defend so-and-so when they were banned from social media. That's probably a lie. I've basically defended everyone from being banned from social media, including people who have targeted me and created risk threats for me. Okay, another one they like, that I'm a grifter, right, that I make money. Welcome to America. We have lots of sponsors. I'm very grateful for my sponsors. And I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I offer my sponsors a way to reach my audience. I'm very proud of them. I think their products are good. That's why I talk about them. And if it makes me money at the same time, great. I'm out to make money. I like money. Congratulations, it's a free market economy. Okay, now to a few of their more policy-based claims. When you aren't lying about me or Matt Walsh or Charlie Kirk or David French or Dan Crenshaw, these folks are busy playing defender of the realm by suggesting that all immigration be shut down on the basis of race. Not on the basis of economics, on the basis of race. Let's be clear, every country has the right and duty to defend its borders. I was for a Trump wall before Trump was for a Trump wall. But legal immigration has been overall, not always, but overall, a massive boon to the United States. In periods in which it is not, that's because government has basically failed to take into account economic, education, and cultural status of new immigrants. The government should take all those factors into account. Again, economic, educational, and cultural status, all of that should be taken into account. And then we should welcome new immigrants who benefit the United States. This is all very logical. By the way, I'm confused by the idea that we should not be attempting to create a brain drain to the United States by drawing immigrants who are highly qualified here. If you're America first, why don't you want more smart, principled people coming into the United States to make us stronger and simultaneously drain other countries? Then you get the questions about Israel and suggesting that if you're pro-Israel, this means prioritizing America over Israel. That's absolute nonsense. If America had a policy that was not good for Israel but was good for America, I would back it. They talk about the USS Liberty incident. There have been multiple studies, US Navy, Joint Chiefs of Staff, CIA, House, Senate, NSA. Most of the reports, according to historian Richard Brownell, do not assign culpability for the incident. They focus on communications failures. I have to say, I'm a little bit bewildered why you're so obsessed with an incident that is now 52 years old. If you have theories that are better than those of the American government, they've got operators standing by, feel free to dial them and tell them about your 5-decade-old theories about a military incident from the 1967 Six-Day War. It's of direct and vital interest now in 2019. Okay, speaking of Europe, they tend to say that they like white European ideals, not Western ideals. Western ideals would be a thing, right? Because you can read about Western ideals in books. White European ideals. I'm wondering exactly what they're talking about. They're not talking about Christian ideals. You can read about those in books too, right? Or Judeo-Christian ideals, which I talk about, right? Instead, they talk about white European ideals. I'm confused what are white ideals? What do white ideals look like? Do white ideals look like, you know, like the professors at these universities who are overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly socialist? What do white ideals look like? How about European ideals, like the socialists over in various parts of Europe? Are you really happy with how Germany's being governed right now, are you? Like, what do European ideals look like to you? Do the white communists at Berkeley have these white European ideals? Race does not have ideals. It's just a melanin level. Okay? It's just a skin color or a place of origin. If you think it does, you are absolutely indistinguishable. You are identical to the identity politics left, to the intersectional left. And spoiler alert, the alt-right is. And then the alt-righters talk about how white people are superior to others, but their own idiocy and bigotry demonstrates that isn't true. They talk about the demographic shift in the country is ruinous. They point to the fact that non-white folk tend to vote Democrat, but this ignores that voting is malleable. The fact is that a huge percentage of California Hispanics vote for Democrats. 80% of Florida Hispanics currently favor Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Okay, Hispanics don't vote universally one way because race is not the basis for voting. Ethnicity is not the basis for voting. Culture may be the basis for voting, but ethnicity is not. Race is not. Again, that is an uncontrollable factor. Culture is a different thing. That affects how people think. But none of this is about reality. Okay, so we have step one, and that is you masquerade as a MAGA Nick. And then we have step two, and that is you claim that you're the true believer. And then we have step three, which is to troll, right? You just show up at places like this, and you say dumb things, then you tell your friends how cool you are, and you tell edgy jokes about the Holocaust and cookies, because, I mean, what could be funnier than that, obviously? I mean, that's just good stuff. And then finally, and this is the big one, you count on the left to help you out. And this is where this nefarious alliance that I've been talking about between the alt-right and the hardcore left comes in. And believe you me, the radical left will. I mean, we've seen proof of it here tonight. I'm here decrying for 40 minutes the evils of the alt-right and white supremacism, and there are people up there calling me an alt-right white supremacist. Okay, the left will literally call anybody on the right alt-right, even if we say vocally and in no uncertain terms that the alt-right is pure, unbridled, vile garbage. Even if members of the alt-right target those people on the mainstream right. Even if Donald Trump condemns the worldview. Listen, you can argue with anything mainstream conservatives say. It's a free country. We disagree with each other pretty frequently, but there's no doubt that mainstream conservatives are pretty easily distinguishable from the alt-right. But it doesn't matter. The media will lie about this anyway. So the Boston Globe will call my website, The Daily Wire, an alt-right outpost. We force them to recant. The Economist will call me the alt-right sage without the rage. We'll force them to recant. Over at Boston University, where I'm speaking next week, they're festooning posters of my face with a Hitler mustache, which makes perfect sense. Students at this university will mob people trying to put up posters for a lecture. They'll tear down banners advertising the speech and replace it with a banner reading, "Be tolerant, accept racism." I challenge you to find anything in this speech or anything else I have said that is racist. Really, I'm waiting. Operators on standby. They'll issue a flyer that literally depicts me as a cockroach on a bottle of bug spray with the label "Ben Be Gone." I do love that one, I will say. That was pretty great. I think that my favorite thing about that is that these people, they hear dog whistles everywhere, right? Donald Trump will say something and they will, "Oh, it's a dog whistle." I say Judeo-Christian values. And then they say, "Oh, that's a dog whistle." When I say Judeo-Christian values, I mean white people, which is obviously untrue. Dog whistles everywhere, just dog whistles everywhere. And then they put out a poster literally with an Orthodox Jew on a bottle of extermination spray with me as a bug. That's not a dog whistle. That's you howling at the moon. I mean, my God. And then they're like, "Oh, well, you know, we just didn't know." Funny, your antenna were up real high in terms of sensitivity for other groups. Weird that your antenna were just completely non-functional when it came to the Jews who don't rank on your intersectional hierarchy of victimhood. Very odd. For every other group, we have to be careful of dog whistles that don't even make sense. When it comes to the Jews, you're like, I'll put him on a bottle of Bug Be Gone, this Jew right here. Maybe it's, I have a feeling it might be because, unfortunately for the intersectional left, Jews don't actually count as a quote-unquote minority group. Right? The only minority groups are the ones that they perceive are victimized. Jews aren't victimized enough, despite the fact that on a per capita basis, Jews are the most victimized group in the United States by hate crimes. And it isn't particularly close, by the way. But it's not just the students at this university. The media will suggest that President Trump is in league with the alt-right. Even at this late date, they'll neglect the fact that Trump has repeatedly condemned white supremacism, that he has purged his administration of people who were remotely friendly with the alt-right, people like Steve Bannon. They'll simply overlook that Trump isn't a white supremacist. They'll declare that the MAGA hat is indeed a Nazi swastika. So, clarification for people on the left who apparently can't listen or read. If someone believes that all men are created equal, and men means like mankind, that's what the word meant when it was written in the Declaration of Independence, you idiots. If someone believes that all men are created equal, that every American should have equality before the law, in free market capitalism, in small government, in equal rights for people of all races, that person is not on the alt-right. In fact, they despise the alt-right, and the alt-right despises them. But people on the left know this, they just prefer the lie. Why? Because their goal is to delegitimize the entire right. The goal is to smear the entire right with the label alt-right, to shut the Overton window to everybody who's anywhere to the right of Hillary Clinton. That's precisely why the New York Times splashed a photo collage on their front page of me and Milton Friedman and Dave Rubin and Richard Spencer. The goal was to lump everybody together and then suggest that we are radicalizing the American population, as though Richard Spencer and I have a damn thing in common. For the first thing, I can read. Political correctness is a weapon for the left, but it's also a weapon for the alt-right. Harvard professor Steven Pinker, who the left tried to cancel for saying this, made this clear last year. He was saying that political correctness is a way for the left to shut down debate. By shutting down debate, they actually open the door to the alt-right, because they say you can't ask certain questions. Then the questions get asked, they shut it down, and people go, wait, I'll just look online for the answer, and the first answer they find might be something from an alt-right website, and they start to take it more seriously, right? This is something Steven Pinker said, so the left called him alt-right and shut him down. There's something that's the most nefarious of all when it comes to these sort of de facto playing off each other political lines between the far left and the alt-right, and that is that they actually mirror themselves in politics and culture. They both have an identity politics view. As I say, the left's view of American politics is that Americans can be identified by group. Americans are black or Hispanic or white or green or Jewish or lesbian, or in the best of all possible worlds, a half Native American, half black, little person who is gender fluid. Right? If you're on the left, you don't describe people by their belief system or by what they do. You describe them by their attributes. You describe them by group attributes. And they have a whole intersectional hierarchy deciding how victimized you are based on how many of these boxes you check. The only difference between the left and the alt-right is that they reverse the hierarchy, meaning that the left thinks that hierarchy is bad, right? They create this hierarchy where white people are the most powerful, and then progressively you go all the way down to the bottom and you get to the LGBT people, and those are the people who are the least powerful according to this hierarchy. And they say that hierarchy is bad, we should just flip the hierarchy. And then you have the alt-right, and they say, no, the hierarchy is good, and we should keep the hierarchy the way that it is. And then there's all the rest of us who are like, what hierarchy? There shouldn't be a hierarchy. What the hell are you talking about? We're individuals. We live in a free country. All of this is terrible for the country. It's terrible for the discourse. We should be able to ask tough questions and answer them. We should. We should be able to have conversations. And we should also be able to see the difference between good, fact-based, rational answers and identity politics bullshit pandering, which is a specialty, unfortunately, of both the radical left and the alt-right. But the left won't have the conversation. The alt-right really doesn't want to either. They prefer memeing and trolling and all the rest. So here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Anyone on the right or left who wants to have an actual conversation about tough issues, that isn't the bumper sticker, but is also not willing to pretend that ugly bigotry is decency, or that identity politics reflects truth, or that trollish memeing is a substitute for an actual worldview. Let's have the conversation. Thanks so much. Happy to take your questions.